Welcome, everybody, to Dojo Talks. Today, we are going to be discussing a new event in the chess world, the Esports World Cup in Riyadh, which 2025 Esports World Cup, which is esports has been having this event for years. This is going to be the first year that chess has an event within it. It'll be, speed chess on computers, but with the participants in the same room as each other. Perhaps not taking full advantage of the internet, but they'll be playing over the internet in the same room. They'll be joining such games as League of Legends and what's another game, folks? Fortnite, maybe?
Oh, I don't know. I think
Probably
there's like
not.
Overwatch,
I know they will
Valorant.
not be joining GeoGuessr because GeoGuessr withdrew from this event this past week, which is something we'll talk about at some point today. So anyway, big new chess event, $1.5 million, slightly new format, slightly new place. It's going to be played in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And there's a whole bunch of different questions that could swirl around this topic. So we can talk about uh, any number of different directions here today, but I'll just list a few directions it could go, some pieces, and we'll see what Jesse and Kostya want to tackle first. For one thing, this is to some extent changing the Magnus Chess Tour, right? Which has been called also the Champions Chess Tour. But back when it was Play Magnus and Chess 24, Magnus established an online tour probably about 5 years ago during COVID, may have been the first year it happened, or maybe even a year before. I'm not sure. But traditionally it had about four events and then a champions final, right? So it was sort of a year-long series of events. This year, instead, there's only two events in the Magnus Tour proper. Sorry, Champions Chess Tour. I just always think of it as the Magnus Tour because he came up with it and he always won it every single
Wins
year.
every year. Yeah.
Um, hopefully it's okay for me to just misspeak like that. So the Champions Chess Tour only had two sort of events of its own, and then it's got the World Esports Cup as kind of a final this year. So it's half the schedule. So we could talk about that. Is it more or is it less for the chess players? That there's less events? Is the prize money similar? I'm guessing somewhat similar with less events, but similar total prize fund. So that's one thing we could talk about. Another thing is it good for chess to be on a new and different stage, for chess players to be mixing to some extent with other esports, which might be more or less popular than chess, depending on what people think.
Hmm.
Then we've got the question of the association with Saudi Arabia. So the event is not only held in Saudi Arabia, but it's sponsored by the Saudi royal family's investment fund, right? They're the money behind the event. And so there's some talk about, oh, are there specific human rights problems with this country or with this royal family that sort of compromise whether or not people should be participating in these events. And specifically, Magnus Carlsen is a big part of this agreement. I think he sort of pushed for this agreement. As part of the agreement, he is an official global sponsor for the event, which we can talk about what that role means at some point today if you guys want. And there are 12 people qualified for the Esports World Cup. I can dash off their names to give everyone a sense of who's participating in this event and what the level is. It's the top 12 from these two combined online events. The last one finished on chess.com 3 days ago with Magnus Carlsen winning in the finals against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who's overall having a great year, by the way, folks. And so the top 12 were Magnus, Hikaru, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Jan Krzysztof Duda, Arjun Erigaisi, Norbek Abdusatorov, Vladislav Artemyev, Alireza Firouzja, Vladimir Fedoseev, Fabiano Caruana, and Wei Yi. So 12 players, including most of the top 10 in the world, maybe minus Gukesh and Prague.
Yeah,
Um,
and they also they just had, I think, the last four qualifiers at this event in Dallas. And I believe those four, I forget the exact four, but I know Bortnick qualified. I think Sorana and Andrew Tang also got in, and there was another guy, I forget his name, but it's basically like several like the notable onliners that were able to get
Oh,
in via this last
cool.
chance thing.
Cool. I thought I'd heard of a special event like that, but I hadn't found the story on it. Thanks, Kostya.
Quick time out here. Did you know that the dojo is an incredible site with tactics, a database, a community of people trying to improve, a training program? All of this is going on at our site. So go check it out. ChessDojo.club. Hit the link in the description.
So yeah, so that's some directions we can take this. What strikes you guys as the first place to start?
Okay, so I definitely thought that we would be talking about this in the context of the event being held in Saudi Arabia
Hmm.
and this like question of like sports washing, and whether chess should be involved. There was the news of GeoGuessr pulling out of this event, which is like a huge, huge game, and that was a big deal. I think this is the second year that they're running the event. I did like some light research, and like the whole event is basically sponsored by Saudi Arabia. It's like they're the ones running the EWCF, the Esports World Cup Foundation.
Okay.
Um, but then I posted a question on Twitter about this topic just to see what people's thoughts were, and then I posted in Discord as well. I didn't really prompt people. I just said like, hey, the chess is going to be involved in this esports thing in Saudi Arabia. What do you guys think? And pretty much all the responses were just related to the topic of whether chess should be an esport. So
Right.
no one really seemed to care about where the event is being held, or this angle is more just like, oh, should chess be played online or not? Basically, was what people
Right.
kind of were interested in.
Which is another direction the conversation can go for sure, right? I mean, we've got a very thorny political, moral, money kind of question we could get into.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or we could get into a question about, chess being seen in different venues and having different formats and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, let's
so,
do the moral one first, because we just addressed first.
okay.
Okay, I'll start and I'll say I think it's very hard for me, and I assume most other people, to draw a line as to when you say no, you can't play in this country, right?
Hmm.
Very difficult. And you imagine every country's done dumb things. Every country has done dumb things. And so it's
Or
like,
mean things, or mean
or
things. It's
mean
not
things, they've
necessarily
done
a
all,
mistake.
so every country has done these things, and then at a certain point, you have to let it go, right? So, for example, Saudi Arabia, I think the biggest thing was when they just blatantly killed Jamal Khashoggi, and I think it was 2018, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's a while since. It's almost 10 years, really. And
Yeah.
so at a certain point, I have to let it go. It was the fact that they like didn't even really try to deny it was like, oh, this looks terrible, dude. This is just awful. No repercussions at all. Um, and so that's the problem with Saudi Arabia and their kind of blatant disregard for, let's call them Western norms, right? Fine. Now, when you contrast that, though, to say Russia, which is another question that we've talked about here on the show,
Hmm.
it's it kind of pales in comparison, right? It's like, oh, that's nothing. That's nothing compared to what Russia's doing. These guys look like great people, you know? So it's
Well, hold
like,
on. I think there's more to Saudi Arabia. Like, okay, again, this is just light research I
yeah,
did, but it's like they get criticized for a lot of like human rights abuses,
yeah,
a lot of executions of like
hmm,
political activists.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Women's rights still not good in Saudi Arabia. LGBT rights basically non-existent.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I mean, no, I mean, I think they definitely, they're definitely up there in terms of the countries with like the worst like human rights abuses.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but
I don't.
Jesse still has a good overall point, right? That they may have some abuses, right? But so do other countries, right? And he doesn't just have to bring up Russia as an example, right? I mean, you could go to many countries and find different degrees of repression against, and it depends on what you look at, right? Like you could say, do you have LGBTQ rights in this country? Do you have women's rights? Do you have, and then it's going to be through the lens of the societies that we've grown up in, right? But do you have political prisoners or not, right? Do people seek asylum and so forth,
Hmm.
right? I mean, in the US, some people think there are political prisoners in the US. for
Hmm.
example, right? And so, how do you, and it could be current versus something in the past, right? And then Jesse also brought up the question of, is there like an expiration at some point, right? So, let's say your country did something really bad 10 years ago or 30 years ago, right? You bombed another country, you invaded another country, right? So right now Russia is invading Ukraine, but a few years ago the US was invading Afghanistan and Iraq, right? So does that count or not? If the Esports World Cup were held in the US, should everybody avoid it because the US had invaded Iraq if it were 3 years ago or 1 year ago or 10 years ago?
Hmm. Hmm.
And what Jesse's claiming is there's not an obvious way to draw a single delineating line for when you would say absolutely not, it has to be a complete, you know, blacklist or
Hmm. Right. And I think there's actually, you could argue that chess is different than other sports in that we have had a tradition of breaking through barriers. And I was thinking about like Soviet Union now seems like a benign thing. But back in the day, man, those people were, oh man, they had czarist ambitions on their entire sphere of influence. And nevertheless, it's not like we would go back in time and say, oh, yeah, Bobby shouldn't have gone to the Soviet Union to play. No, of course he should have, right? Of course we should be playing those great players in the Soviet Union. So the idea of like boycotting that just because the Soviet Union was the Soviet Union, especially in hindsight, be like, no, come on, right?
Mhm.
So there's a sense in the chess world, I feel historically, of we are going to overcome whatever political divisions are between us to engage in not only a game, but kind of a friendly game. Like Fischer could be friends with those people, and we could, just because we're chess players, we have a certain uh, esprit among us that acknowledge, I don't know, some kind of special connection between those of us who've worked on the game a lot, right? So I don't have a clear line. I feel very nervous, for example, about the idea of saying, oh, we should be playing with the Russians right now. I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how like the line is supposed to be set in the sand with
Mhm.
chess and Russia right now. But like in comparison to Russia, yeah, Saudi Arabia, it just seems like it's minor in comparison. And already with Russia, I'm like, God, shouldn't we at least let those guys play? I don't, it's hard for me.
Yeah, I also couldn't find a clear bright line for where what is or isn't acceptable, and when you look deeply into what we do, um because of the power structures of the world as it's built now, almost everybody has some associations with these same things, right? Like, for
Mhm.
example, if you're supposed to avoid the Esports World Cup because it's funded by Saudi money, well, then by the same token, you should avoid Citibank because Citibank is partially owned by the same investment fund, right? So the Saudi royal family has like one major investment fund, um, and they have 5% of Citibank or something, or if they've got, some chunk of Citibank, they've got a
Sure.
chunk of Facebook. So you have to get off Facebook, if you're buying
Mhm.
ads on any Meta property, then you're creating a return on investment for the Saudi
Yeah.
royal family.
Anytime you buy gas, you are propping up their gas price.
They also own a stake in BP, speaking of gas,
Yeah.
right? So like I
Mhm.
looked and because they've got an investment fund that's just shy of $1 trillion, um they
Yeah.
own they own shares in tons of companies. It's almost certain that 99% of us listening to this podcast or discussing this topic that we have some business dealing with a business that they partially own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's yeah, that's what makes it like very complicated because okay, I mean it's definitely different, like going to your bank versus let's say running like Esports World Cup, like a major event on their soil. And I think this argument of sports washing definitely makes a lot of sense because it's clear like that's kind of their goal. Like with all these events, they've got like the golf project. I think they've signed a number of like superstar soccer players as well. They got like a big soccer league. So it's definitely helping like the image of their country,
Mhm.
but it's not like yeah, the rest of the world has completely disassociated themselves with Saudi Arabia. Like I believe like the U.S. government is still dealing with them and stuff, despite all of their
Hmm.
human rights abuses and lack of Western ideals and all
Right.
that stuff. So
And
yeah,
other
it's
countries deal with the US despite our lack of Western values and humanity.
right. So it's like, yeah, it's tough for me to say that chess should be like above it all and like, oh, we shouldn't. Like it's hard. I don't know. It's hard to say like because the rest of the world clearly it's not like Saudi Arabia is just being boycotted by everyone, and it's like chess is the one thing that's like, oh, going and having an event there. Should also say it's not the first chess event in Saudi Arabia or in some kind of questionable place. We've had lots of like high profile events there. And I think partly the issue is that chess has a history of lacking good sponsors and good funding. And so a lot of it, I think, is just like taking money from whoever will give it to us, whoever will fund some events.
Right. I
And
mean, people played in events arranged by Kirzan Ilyumshinov for years, right? And he had also had probably multiple, but at least one journalist killed, right? So very,
Hmm.
very similar kind of dude. And chess players played in his events.
Yeah. I think it was still, I want to say, it was a little surprising that Magnus did it and initiated it. And I think it does have a lot to do with this word that Kosi used called sports washing. And what I mean by that is, I think that Magnus is a huge sports fan. And when he sees guys like Ronaldo going over there and loads of other top soccer slash, we call them football players went over there, it's like Magnus sees those guys doing it. He's like, well, fine, I'm just following that lead. No problem. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think that's a huge thing that they've done. I think if they hadn't done that with the golf world, the soccer world, and these other worlds that they're using sports, tennis, right? They have Nadal playing over there too.
Yeah.
Then Magnus wouldn't have done it. So it is in that sense, it's a genius marketing campaign, the sports washing that they're doing.
Yeah. Now, I also let me just say, I don't mean to completely undermine the idea of sports washing, but I think that's not their primary goal. I think, I mean, this is really guessing at people I know nothing about, but I
Mhm.
think but from what I could read, the primary goal of what Saudi Arabia is doing with their investment fund is they're diversifying the wealth of their nation, right? Like it starts with selling oil, then there's a ton of money, but you know, large wealthy individuals or groups or companies want to have a diversified set of holdings, right? So that if something happens to oil or something happens to,
Mhm.
peanuts or whatever they're in, right, that's not the end of their reign.
Mhm.
So when I looked at it, I mean, I think the number one purpose is to just become more rich, right? To turn your money into more and more money. Like they're not, I don't think they're planning to lose money on golf in order to improve their image or lose money on esports to improve their image. I think they're planning to make money on esport, to make money on golf, if that makes sense.
Mm. Okay.
And if it makes their image better, I mean, I'm sure everybody wants to have a better image, right? But
Yeah.
I would say I think the primary thrust is making more money and diversifying your finances so they're more secure against, the vagaries of the future.
I want okay. I think there's definitely some attempt to make money. I definitely think them buying Newcastle United, that was an investment that I could see as part of a diversified portfolio. But I don't think they're making any money on this esports thing, dude.
I mean, it's early days,
Early
but
days. Okay,
from
fair.
what I read, that's what they said their goal was.
Hmm.
And, they didn't say we're doing this to be nice or we're doing this because we love sports.
Yeah,
Right? They said we're doing this to make money, and esports and video games in general are a pretty big industry in
fair.
the world. I think I saw some quote from probably a Saudi official saying that it was $230 billion in 2024, the video game
Mhm.
industry,
Yeah.
So, um, and they also apparently have an idea of making Saudi Arabia a tourist destination, right? So building like exciting venues that people would want to come to.
Well, one of the things about this is if you really wanted to build on it, bring chess into this world and then build on it, is to do really what they did with golf. And I think
Hmm.
it's a fascinating thing, right? For years, there was a very strong PGA, the Players Golf Association, and they ran all the events. They had all the control, all the top players. And then Saudi Arabia came in and was like, no, we got some money over here. And then they established a competing league. And now the leagues don't talk to one another. So you just have one player, top players, about half the top players in one, half the top players in the other. You cannot play in one league and then go play in the other. So they've definitely established a competing league. And it's interesting thing about the chess example because FIDE is not nearly as strong as the PGA. So if they were really going to try to do something with it, it wouldn't be ridiculous to try to have a country with a lot of money like Saudi Arabia just try to take over FIDE. And I think a lot of people would like to see that. FIDE's got a
Yeah.
lot of enemies, both external and internal, that want to overthrow it. So I don't think that's going to happen right away, but with the golf example, it's on the table,
Right. I mean, FIDE made some kind of threats like that around the freestyle
right?
chess, right? Like they could have been like you either play in the freestyle or you play in the FIDE, but not both. But
Hmm.
it seems like they relented and people will be able to play in both, right?
Right.
But in a sense, you could think there's a third parallel chess circuit, which is the esports chess
Yeah.
circuit, right? Not OTB, all online. It's kind of been split between chess.com and FIDE, sort of
Hmm.
informally over the last,
Yeah.
4 or 5 years, right? Chess.com was running things like the Rapid Chess Championships, the Blitz matches, right? And they had a Rapid Chess Championship, Global Chess Championship, so forth, right? So there could be a concept where maybe chess.com, who
Hmm.
are party to this partnership, right? Because
Yeah.
they currently sort of own the Magnus chess tour, right? That's now their event and property. So this is a deal between chess.com and the Esports World Cup and Magnus Carlsen. So
Right.
you could see a potential for a deal between chess.com and
Hmm.
the Saudi government or the Esports World Cup Foundation, which essentially probably answers to the Saudi money that created it and backs it, right? But they could potentially create uh, a more developed second format and sphere for chess events.
Hmm.
Well, I
Hmm.
feel like they already have. I mean, you've got like the Title Tuesday and the Speed Chess Championship and the Champions Chess Tour. I mean, that's all it's all chess.com. Actually, I'm struggling to think of FIDE events in this sphere.
Mhm.
I feel like FIDE is more just kind of been ignoring the online circuit
Hmm.
Right. There
and
were those
just focusing on.
Armageddon or Arena Armageddon events.
But those were in person and over the board.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Well, let's
yeah,
get to,
maybe that was their attempt at some exciting chess. But
Right.
and this, of course, relates to this topic of is chess an esport? We put that as
Mhm.
the title of the podcast, but obviously it's also about this event in Saudi Arabia. Um,
Right.
so I want to back up for just for a second. And so for most of my life, FIDE has been trying to get chess recognized as an Olympic sport, right?
Yeah.
And they went to all kinds of lengths. They hold this thing called the Olympiad. They do all kinds of things, such as drug testing, so they could be ultimately viewed as an Olympic sport. They do other concessions too. And this has been going on for decades, and it's never happened. Then, just another example, me and David played 2008 in the Mind Games. It was funny. It was a hilariously misnamed event called the Mind Games event in China. So there we were placed alongside not running and hockey such as in the Olympics, but it was Go, backgammon, bridge, shogi, these kinds of
Right.
games. Chess.
But it also had the word Olympiad in it, right? It was
Yeah,
like the
right.
Mind Sports Olympics,
Exactly
and
right.
it was in Beijing maybe 1 or 2 months after the
Exactly.
Olympics in Beijing. So it was somehow associated or trying to cling on to some coattails there.
Exactly. Right, right, right. And then I feel, and I do feel a little threatened by this, for years that chess.com has been trying to push chess as an esport and as, basically blitz chess being the main thing, right?
Right.
We've talked at length about this, about like what does the world championship means and what does it mean? And Kostya's always like, oh, I want it just to be blitz chess. We have this debate going on. And in any case, Magnus right? In his older age, where he's not comfortable or as comfortable as he used to be playing classical, wants the faster time controls too. So now you have a synergy between Magnus, who wants to play faster, chess.com, which wants it to be online and faster, and then a
Mhm.
new player with some money being like, "Oh yeah, we'll take this as part of our esports whole, portfolio."
Yeah. And this one article I read, by the way, that was sort of speculating on Magnus's role in all this,
Yeah.
it did say maybe he's also making this deal because he thinks that this Saudi connection could help to sponsor and further the freestyle tour,
Yeah.
which is also maybe close to Magnus's heart, right? So for him, to some extent, you can see like from one perspective, he doesn't need this to eat, right? Like when we talk about moral questions, to
Hmm.
me, it's also often about the person making the choice. Can they afford to make the choice, and what does it cost them, and so forth, right?
Hmm.
Um, and you know, from a simple perspective, what it costs us to say something bad about Saudi Arabia versus somebody living there versus to say something bad about the US versus somebody living in Germany, right? There's always different costs. And Magnus, obviously, he doesn't need to do this to eat,
Hmm.
right? He's taken
But
care of. So
but
he
neither did Ronaldo need it.
doesn't
Ronaldo
need the
definitely
job,
need it. Nadal didn't need it. All these
right?
people didn't need it.
But maybe Magnus still has some ambitions with these connections to build sort of his idea and his legacy for the chess world, right? Like
Hmm.
maybe he wants to see certain events promoted more in the chess world, even beyond his reign,
Hmm.
looking
Well, I
more
think
than
that,
5 or 10 years.
I mean, with chess, it's like it's clear that chess.com and similar have been trying to turn chess into an esport for the last several years, like just clearly been going in that direction. Not like they want to take over the World Championship circuit. I'm not sure about that, but they've definitely been trying to push chess as an esport.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's like the second year the event is running. They had one last year and seems to have been successful. They're doing one again. You have all these other games like League of Legends, Overwatch, that are like in the competition. So I feel like chess is like the new kid on the block, and they're kind of like, okay, well, everyone else is doing, so I'm also gonna go jump off of this bridge. It's just like it's
Yeah.
just kind of following in the footsteps. It's like, yeah, if you want to be an esport, this is kind of what you have to do.
Yeah. Are we transitioning from the moral topic to this topic now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because in that case, I would say I actually feel like chess might always be a slightly weird participant in esports. From a chess perspective, I see no problem having sort of classical chess, esports chess, Fisher random. I can see all from the chess world. I can see it's fine from my perspective to have different circuits and different types of chess that will have maybe different audiences, etc. But I feel like if you just look at it at an esports event with people playing a bunch of video games and then chess, I feel like chess would always stand out as sort of a sore thumb or as an odd one out.
Hmm.
Like we don't have the graphics, we don't. I don't know. It feels like like you could take 100 esports and say which one of these stands out, and it would always be chess. Is my feeling.
Uh-huh.
Right.
I
Well,
want
that's because we have the history, right? So it's kind of being like converted into an esport. That's to me what makes chess special, and I feel like chess is kind of above all these video games,
Hmm.
is that it's just been around for like hundreds of years and it's survived. Whereas like video games, they haven't been around for very long in general, and a lot of these games are pretty new, and I feel like people like the games. Of course, people like video games. They're fun, but they don't have the bravado and like the history that chess has.
Hmm.
And it's like video games often have to be like updated. People make jokes about like Chess 2.0, when's Chess 2.0 coming out,
Hmm.
because they're used to video games being updated. Like Overwatch, for example. Overwatch was a great game for several years, and now there's Overwatch 2, where they just, changed a bunch of it. It's like still pretty similar.
Hmm.
But I guess for me, it's like video games, none of the games have proven that they have the staying power that chess has, because they just simply haven't been around for long enough. And
But
in the
it feels
future,
like
there's
they're
just
all
going to
in a
be,
category that chess is not quite in, Like almost every other esport feels like a video game, and chess.com feels like a board game that someone put on a computer, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm surprised you guys are so lenient on this. So I will take the case of, let's call it the conservative argument because I'm the old guy here. So you can tell me that chess is an art. Fine. You want to call it a science? I'm okay with that. Personally, I like to think of it as a martial art. You could think of it as a variety of other things, a sport,
Hmm.
but it is not a video game. No, no, no. It is not a video game. Sorry, chess.com. It is not. It will never be a video game. These video games are just little fun, flimsy things that change all the
Right.
time. They don't have the strategic depth or thinking that we have. I'm sorry. I'm sure
Yeah.
it's cool. I don't
Does
doubt it
Puzzle
at all,
Rush
but we're
seem
not a video game.
does Puzzle Rush seem like almost like a video game?
Well, I think
It's a
that's a
good
great, actually, that's a great
philosophical question.
example of
Yeah.
chess.com trying to turn chess into a uh, esport, a video
Hmm.
game. Yeah. It's
Yeah, I
still
mean that's
quite
kind
not
of
a
like
video game to me because I feel like chess has a history of solving puzzles.
hmm.
And so it's its own special thing, but the flavor they give it is definitely one of a video game where you get a little
But
dopamine hit.
yeah, the Puzzle Rush is a little bit kind of like, Tetris or Candy Crush or something, right? It's
Mhm.
like little manageable tiny bite-sized pieces of chess puzzling or chess thinking,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
Dropped at you one at a time in rapid succession, and you sort of spin them around and place them.
Uh-huh. That's a good metaphor.
But
Uh,
there is a distinction between any video game and an esport. And I think
Mhm.
that's like esports are competitive, right? So there are lots of video games that are just completely single player. They're
Mhm.
not competitive. We wouldn't consider them an esport.
but
But
then
I
even
think
then they
like
can do
one thing,
like speed, what is it? Speed runs, Kostya? Like you could see like who could finish the thing faster or get the higher score or something. Even a single player game could be an esport, couldn't it?
well, it could be turned into one, but generally the video games that are esports are the ones that are like multiplayer,
Okay.
online, competitive.
Okay.
Um, and generally that's the thing. I think also like very typical thing about video games that they're very much based on like reaction speed. Like that's a huge thing.
Mhm.
Like
Hmm.
mouse skills, aim, this
Yeah.
kind of stuff, which is important for online chess too, like Blitz and Bullet.
Hmm.
But it's like that's not really what chess is about, right? Like chess is more about like the deep strategic. It feels like yeah, we're kind of more in the category of board games like Go, which is like super deep and requires a lot of contemplation. It's not about reaction speed and
Right.
things like that.
Like, did you successfully aim your queen to D5, not D4, right? It's all about like where you drop the queen. Did you get the aim right? It's not so much, right?
Yeah.
It's more like the part in your brain where you pick where the queen should go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where yeah, they're changing the game a bit, in this sense where it's like it's much more about speed, especially blitz. In this event, the EWC, the time control is 10 plus 0, so
Hmm.
no increment. So it's definitely going to come down to lots and lots of time scrambles, which uh, obviously it must be intentional because a lot of their events they play with increment so that it feels a little bit more like it's decided on the board. But this one, it's going to be very much, yeah, decided by the clocks in a lot of cases. Um, and yeah, I mean, it really does change the game. Like, for instance, um, flagging culture is a huge thing when you play without increment. And
Right.
straight up, a lot of end games that would otherwise be drawn are now won or lost because you don't have enough time to hold an opposite color bishop endgame, for example, if the other side can just make 50 moves and then 100 moves and then move a pawn and then just flag you eventually. So a
Hmm.
lot of like completely drawn endgames are actually just complete losses if one side has more time.
Yeah.
So it really is like a very different game when you
And
play it in
and in
this
an
format.
esport context, all of that would be normal. It wouldn't be like cheap or there wouldn't be any moral
Hmm.
question around it, right? It's just like that's sort of like the mechanics of the game and the time running out and you're just trying
Hmm.
to, hold them off. I mean, it would be the same thing as trying to prevent your opponent from scoring the last 5 seconds in a sports game and not trying to score yourself. You're not obliged to score, you're running out the clock, right? Like,
Yeah, no, it's very typical.
fine.
So one thing we've talked about before, on this show is that the World Championship, by contrast, right, which has much longer time controls, is a hugely watched event, and the cachet associated with it is so much greater. And when we looked at it, it was very interesting. We looked at which events actually get the most views. Then things like the PogChamps really do get people into it. They get a lot of views and that kind of thing. And that's, I think, a little bit also what they're hoping for here, right? You see the stars of the gaming world come out, and Naka isn't just a great player, but he's this great streamer, right? So you have all of his fans following at the same time.
Mhm.
And, you know, part of it is definitely a cultural shift that it's trying to reflect, where they're saying, well, people don't want to think that long anymore. That's what, and we're moving to faster time controls, it seems anyway. It's also Kostya is a younger generation, and that's the kind of the way he feels to a large extent. I'm suddenly the conservative voice. I never thought of myself as a conservative. I think I'm a chess conservative. I think that's true. I'm a chess conservative. But also, um,
Chess trad.
for the fans as well. The fans they argue. I don't think so far I don't see this as really playing out, but the fans they would argue want that speed. They want the like, oh no, he hung his queen, that kind of thing, right? That kind of drama. And you have some commentator like Hess with a huge mouth going, no, like that, some kind of thing, drama that is evoked when a game is decided, at the last minute because somebody lost on time or whatever.
Well, I don't actually know if that's what the fans want. Like a lot of chess players are really not into the esports thing,
Right.
and they're very much into the classical chess, Wildcard World Championship, Norway chess.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to esports, they kind of just don't care. All the events just blend in together. All the Champions Chess Tour, it's all kind of the same, and they're not that interested. It just seems like a side event essentially. So, but so I feel like we're just dealing with two different audiences. We have like the classic chess players, a lot of them tournament players, club players. They grew up playing chess, watching chess, like Kasparov and so on, Fischer maybe, and they're much more interested in the classical side of the game. And then we have like the new audience, especially since Queen's Gambit, that maybe got into chess from that show, maybe got into chess from PogChamps or some other event, but they're not like, they never played a tournament in their lives. They're mainly, yeah, not even aware of like how FIDE works or the World Championship or anything like that. They like Hikaru, they like Magnus, right? They're fans of these guys, and yeah, they very much want to watch the speed chess. And I think that's part of the issue that the chess world has right now is that it's very divided between these two camps. You have like the traditionalists, and then of course the new age
Mm-hmm.
esports fans, of which there are many, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I don't think I'm saying anything here that I haven't already said on a previous episode, but my take on that whole division is like it's fine, just have multiple things, right? Like understand that there's a pretty big difference between an esport or online blitz version of chess, right? And a classical version of chess. And the same for correspondence chess or, freestyle chess, if any other form ever takes off. It doesn't have to be two, right? Like there could be three or four different chesses at some
Mhm.
point in the future. I'm fine with it. I don't see any problem with it. I can have my preference and I don't mind if someone else has their own preference, right? So,
I just want to, okay, let me just, the conservatives always react out of fear. So I want to just tell you my fears here. So, first of all, for one thing that I think is really interesting is let's say you go look at a Reddit post, especially this, I've seen this in the last couple of years. People will be like, "Oh, I'm a 1600 player, blah blah blah," and then you read a little deeper, and you're like, "Oh, they're referring to their chess.com blitz rating."
mhm.
So it's a very interesting but subtle shift that's happening where people are beginning to think of their strength as their blitz rating. And that's if there's anything close to an esport, it's a blitz rating, like a 3-0 time control. Some that I
But that
enjoy
is the
3-0, by
rating,
the way.
Jesse.
It's not real chess, but that's what they're starting to do. And then also you have stronger players like Kostya and others who are like, these longer time controls, I don't have the time for it. It's too much for me. And it's interesting, right? Because like if you imagine 100 years ago, they had less time. It was just harder living. And now it's not easy living now, right? It still costs money to go to tournaments and it takes time. It's hard to do, but it's definitely easier than 100 years ago. But we say to ourselves, oh, we just don't have time anymore for these longer events. And so there's that narrative as well, which I think is partly informed by people just moving to the online space. Because in the online space, there's a frenetic pace that's set, which feels like you don't have time because you got to go check your phone. You got to go do these things. These things are happening online. I don't have time to be sitting here without a phone for 5 hours.
But Kostya's currently playing 4 9 round classical tournaments
Yeah, I mean,
in a row. And
I
But
want to
he's
clarify.
but
Yeah,
once
he's
he
even
gets his
playing somewhere
GM
it's like
title,
two
he's
time
done.
controls,
He's
right?
done.
So
He's on the hunt for the GM title, and then after that, he's no more interested.
if he doesn't get the GM title, he's not going to say, "I wish I hadn't spent all those hours playing chess." I think he's playing the tournaments because he wants to play them, regardless of the result.
yeah, I'm still very much into classical chess, given by how much I'm playing.
Mhm.
But I do wish that we could just play freestyle. The more I think about it, for some of the reasons that Jesse
Uh-huh.
is bringing up, is it's just like, I mean, well, okay, I'll give you guys an example. I was at Granky Open. There was a freestyle open running side by side. It
Uh-huh.
was 2 rounds per day, 2 classical rounds per day. It was brutal. After my game, I have to go eat quickly and then wait for the pairings to come out and then just immediately start preparing. After the evening game, I have to eat dinner, then go back and immediately start preparing for the next round, which is in the morning. Meanwhile, the freestyle guys, they don't got to prepare for the next round. They go, they compete, they give it their all, and then they rest. And then they just show up for the next game. They don't even know what position it's going to be. And then they sit down and play. And, it's like, it's such a bummer. And I realize, like, people actually people are of course used to the main position, the starting position, but they're just getting way too much for free. It's like people are just trying to like memorize it to the depths and just like know as much as possible. And as a result, actually much less chess gets played when the two players are just reciting, the first 12, 15 moves and they're just playing just, based on whatever they studied that morning. In the past, it used to be different because like we didn't have it wasn't as easy to prepare. So you guys, of course, remember like 5, 10 years ago, you couldn't just learn a new opening overnight and then play it against the opponent. Whereas now that's like what all kinds of players are doing. Like club players just like look up a new opening and they're like, oh, this dude plays this against Slav. All right, I guess I'll go Slav today. And then they
Mhm.
just run through their chessable course and then just like learn it in like an hour. And it's
Mhm.
like they just get so much for free just by
I,
virtue of being able to study at home.
I fear we're getting way off topic, but I love this Kostya completely embraces Fisher random moment. And I mean, I was learning new openings in a day or an hour, or just picking openings like this based on opponents 10, 15 years ago before Chessable. But I think the key thing Kostas is saying is he's not going to regret the 6 hours he spent playing a game, but he might regret the like several hours he spent preparing and getting tired between games.
It is a bummer, yeah, to have to try and like, yeah, memorize all this new stuff. And yeah, of course, all my games are live now. All my games get published, so people can just look up and yeah, prepare,
Everybody's
all
preparing
kinds of
for you.
stuff. Um, and yeah, I mean, so I totally get the instincts to try and pull chess away from that.
Mhm.
Going back to what we were talking about with like the divisions of the two camps,
Yeah.
one thing that's I think very apparent is like when you talk about Magnus, like from the classical chess world point of view, Magnus has more or less quit playing classical. Like he plays 1 or 2 tournaments a year. All right, he's playing Norway chess right now. He's
Mhm.
probably gonna win it, and make us all look all look dumb. But essentially, he stopped playing classical. He's like not playing these like major events anymore. He's not fighting for the world championship and so on. But he's winning every other event that he plays. He's winning like all the blitz events, the freestyle events, and so for the esports audience, Magnus is like number one, no question, greatest player. For the classical chess world, it's like he's semi-retired, maybe more
Mhm.
than semi-retired.
Right.
Right. But as we say this, Kostya, I mean, he beat the world champion, so to speak, Gukesh, yesterday. in
Hmm.
I
Norway
know.
chess, right? The other top esport player, streamer, Hikaru, right, also won his game against Fabi yesterday.
Hmm.
They're currently playing each other right now live, and they are number one and number two in the classical ratings, as well as in, any
Right.
esports measure. Uh, Naka
Yeah.
and Magnus right now.
Well, Hikaru, at least he's still in it. Like he was talking about retiring, but like he played American Cup. He's playing this. He
Yeah.
was saying that like he might think about like qualifying for the candidates. A little wild that he's saying might, being the clear number two player in the world right now.
Yeah.
But like, okay, Hikaru at least it's clear that he's still in it. Magnus, of course, has, left the world championship and all that stuff behind. But yeah, I mean, actually, it's just sad that like Magnus is still clearly the number one classical player in the world, but no longer. I mean, he's just yeah, he's tired of it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair
You
enough.
know, so Shane Gillis has this amazing comedic bit where he's talking about how as a guy gets older, all his friends are liberal, but then he starts reading a little history, and that's the first sign. That's the first sign that he's going to turn. He's going to start turning conservative because he's starting to read history. He doesn't know it at first, you know, he doesn't know it at first, but then slowly he turns conservative. And what I'm realizing just now is that's what has happened to me in the chess world. I have read too much chess history, and I now suddenly find myself like I don't even know how it happened, but just the idea of chess as a video game, I recognize it square in the face. I have become a chess conservative. I didn't even know it happened, but there it is. Bam. I read too much chess history, and now I'm a chess conservative.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Interesting.
But I mean, does that extend to a point, Jesse, where you don't like the fact that these online events even happen, or is it fine with you if they happen and you don't have to watch them?
Well, I'm very happy we're doing this topic because otherwise, honestly, it wasn't even my radar. It was like, whatever, they're gonna go do something in Saudi Arabia, whatever. But the more we're talking about it, I'm like, well, I'm just seeing the trends. So regardless of the specifics of how this event goes down, I'm just seeing trends where it's moving in a direction that the chess conservative doesn't like you know? And there's nothing I can do
You don't
about it.
like
I
it.
can scream and pant, but
Yeah.
there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just watching on
Well,
the sidelines.
yeah, it is like potentially the esports thing, and as chess grows as an esport, it is kind of an existential threat to
Yeah,
FIDE because FIDE has to continue to find funding for their events, which
hmm,
historically they've had issues. They
huge.
have to like continue
Fair.
marketing their events.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
and thankfully for them, of course, players are obviously still very interested in the World Championship cycle. Like the last World Championship with Gukesh and Ding, it didn't have Magnus in it, but it still had a ton of interest. I think it's mainly because of Gukesh's involvement. Gukesh is this new kid, fresh blood, very exciting. India loves chess, so they get a ton of interest from India. But they're gonna have to like keep it going. And if a few years down the line we see like these major online events with huge prize funds that have like completely surpassed FIDE, well, then players, of course, are going to take notice and then focus on the online events because that's where the money's going to be.
I see
Hmm.
what you mean. So basically, in theory, you could have two worlds of chess going side by side. They don't have to mess with each other, but top players are going to be making choices where they want to play. And if the money gets completely out of balance, then you will have all the top players participating in the esports and skipping the FIDE events. And that could be like a crisis for the chess conservatives.
Yeah.
I see. I see. I hadn't felt threatened yet. Obviously, I have my preference. My preference is classical chess. Like
Hmm.
Jesse, that's what I want to play. That's what I want to watch. Of course, I prefer if it's Fisher random, but still, slow. Time to think. Time to find good moves. I haven't particularly felt threatened by any of this other stuff. I just thought if some people like this, they should do this. And,
Hmm.
I felt no more threatened by chess esports than I have by GeoGuessr esports or League of Legends or Overwatch. Like if some people want to play League of Legends, cool. There's
Hmm.
still great chess players playing great chess games. I mean, there's never been a day where I didn't have enough chess material to go and study for myself, you
Right.
know. Always great stuff out there. If anything, more now that there's the freestyle stuff. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. It's not super clear where chess is going. Um Obviously now there's like more events being held in like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Um and yeah, but yeah, I think the onus is on FIDE, of course, to kind of keep the interest alive. Like they need sponsors, they need funding, they got to run like a nice cycle. Um, well, of course, what's going for FIDE is that they just have this massive history. Like I feel like if you polled the young players like Gukesh, Noterbeck, Arjun, all these guys, I feel like if you asked them like, hey, would you rather be a professional like esports chess player or just a professional chess player in the traditional sense? I feel like they would rather keep it classical. You know, they kind of like the classical chess. They want to fight for the world championship. Um, so FIDE definitely has that on their side. It's like chess players that grow up like with this chess culture. They're very much invested and they dream of becoming world champion and they're very much into it. But yeah, like if the money runs out, they stop, having these like big events, then of course it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I feel like we're near the end of this, but I also feel like I didn't give any answer to the first question about the morals of the whole
Okay.
situation. I just agreed or supported Jesse's general framework that it's hard to create a bright line, that every country has its faults, every leader has done things wrong, and there's the question of how long do you hold it against a country or a leader or a person who's done
Hmm.
something, right? Um, and I and that it also depends on to what extent do you need that collaboration? How important is it for your life, right? Like if Kostya wanted to completely avoid any company that has uh, Russian investment money or Saudi investment money or American investment money, depending on Kostya's politics, right? Like if he wanted to, like how feasible would it be? What would it cost him to try and avoid every single company, right? Is there any way for him to do it? Versus some of these players are going out of their way to go participate in the event, promote the event, and make a bunch of money on it that they don't even necessarily need, right? Like in Magnus's case,
Hmm.
right? Furthering his own ambitions, whether those ambitions are for himself personally or for his vision of chess. And maybe he's just trying to do what he thinks is best for chess, right? So I agree with the framework that you can't draw a clear line and say this is okay and this isn't okay. But I would still say that from my perspective, what Magnus is doing is actually not right. I think that it's different to be in some small ways linked with this or that, or not, not know that this company owns that, or that so and so owns 5% of EA Sports, and you bought like a basketball video game you wanted to play with your brother, and so you sent 10 cents into the pocket of someone you might not like.
Hmm.
But do you know all these entanglements, and what choices do you have day by day for just getting around versus deliberately going out and making a big deal and then knowing that you're going to go around as a spokesman, and as this one journalist unearthed, they think that these ambassador positions include a clause saying you can't say anything bad about the government of Saudi Arabia or the royal family,
Yeah, no, I
right? So you're going to be like a spokesperson who can't even speak honestly. I mean, if I were going to be a spokesperson for Cheerios, I would want to be able to say whatever I want about Cheerios, right? I would want to genuinely like them enough that I've got positive things to say about them, and then I'll say those things. But
hmm
I don't, but I wouldn't be a spokesman or a global ambassador for Cheerios if there was something so bad about Cheerios that Cheerios felt they had to write into my contract that I can't say anything about Cheerios that they don't approve of,
Well, I
right?
don't know. I feel like that is a pretty reasonable like clause for like ambassadors and things like that. Like generally you have to be positive about the
I
thing.
understand the direction that it comes from and how it does make sense. It's like I'm not going to pay you $1 million, Kostya, to go out there and tell people that ChessDojo doesn't work, right? Like, why am I paying you then, right? But at the same time, if we made like a deal with somebody, we actually wouldn't include that clause because we know they don't have anything to say about how Kostya once had, 10 rival chess teachers like killed in an alleyway, right? Like we don't have to worry about what someone might say about us. There's not like a bad thing that we would be worrying that people would say, right? So we wouldn't actually have to put that clause in. You would just make sure that you were hiring somebody who had used ChessDojo and knew about it, so they were informed about what they were talking about. But you wouldn't try to control what they say.
Um, yeah, no, no, I think you're right on that. I mean, I think the other thing, it's like with Saudi Arabia specifically, it's like even if they didn't have that clause, they have a history of not being kind to people that speak out against them. So there would just be like this implied pressure, right? That you shouldn't get in bed with them and then criticize them. Like
Yeah.
you'd be a huge target.
Yeah. So for Magnus to seek out the deal, take a bunch of optional money, on top of it to try to be the ambassador, and then on top of it to be saying positive things about members of the royal family, which I saw at least one quote
Hmm.
in this guy's article. Um, I think that's beyond the pale, actually. Like, I understand why some struggling chess players would play in tournaments run by Kirzan Ilyumshinov, right? And take his money and maybe and even shake his hand. But when I was at events like that, I would try to stay away from the guy and not put myself in a position to shake his hand. But this is totally different. It's so optional, and then it's going out and saying good things about people. Personally, I wouldn't want to make a deal like this, not just with Saudi Arabia. Let's again not just make it seem like we have our Western bias or whatever. Like I wouldn't do this with, a venture of Donald Trump's, of Joe Biden's, of Putin's, of Macron's, of like any world leader that I didn't like, which is all of them. Uh, for those who didn't know. So I wouldn't do it. I don't need to do it. It feels very optional, and I don't think it's worth whatever ambitions someone thinks that they are pursuing.
Okay, we should probably wrap it up. I want to say with Magnus, one of the things, let's just back it up and say Magnus is very ambitious from a business standpoint. He was too ambitious with the Play Magnus group. They bought too many things, and that thing collapsed. And since then, I guess I would say Magnus is trying to rebuild his empire. So, and he is not afraid of making alliances to do so. He's done it with this Bootner guy who's a little bit weird. He's now
Hmm.
doing it with Saudi Arabia, I'm sure, and he got in bed now. Now he's also in bed with chess.com. So the guy, the guy is using relationships to build back up the broken uh, edifice that was Play Magnus Group, right?
Hmm.
So,
He's also launched that Take 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 app, which is
right,
consistent
yeah.
with what you're saying.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
every
Might be a
world
case of
champion,
somebody with too much ambition, maybe.
every world champion is going to need something after they're done with the crown. Kasparov has got his thing with the politics. You could also lose your mind afterwards completely, or you try to become some, entrepreneur. And that's my sense of what Magnus ultimately is trying to do after he retires.
Hmm.
Yeah.
He might get into golf. I mean, I hear he likes golf very much, so that might
He could
he
play
might
golf
just
in Saudi Arabia. That's his in.
start playing
That's his
start
in.
playing
Yeah.
more golf. Um, yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, David. It's like I don't know. I had that same instinct as well, that it just like it doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know. I mean, there are potential positives to working with a country like Saudi Arabia. Like these events might move the needle in the right direction as they kind of open themselves up to like Western media and stuff like that. Like they're not allowed to they're supposed to treat the players kindly. They're not allowed to like oppress the players and things like that. Um, so, there's a chance that this kind of like moves the world in, the right direction, so to speak.
Right. Like I think
Um,
LGBTQ participants in the esports were told very like clearly, even though it's not allowed in their country, you are allowed, you will be treated differently, you can come and play, you will be safe here, right? Um, and I think already they participated in 2024 and people wore like pride versions of the esports jerseys and stuff, right? Which
Mhm.
normally you could not, maybe I got this wrong, but I think normally you couldn't walk around with like pride gear and pride flags and stuff like that
Yeah.
on the
Right.
streets in normal times, but exceptions were made for the esporters. So I've heard people making that kind of argument about, oh, you should try to engage, you can change minds, you can represent. And I I I don't know if there's a general feeling in the LGBT community one way or another. So I can't speak to a general sense of that, but I read just a couple individual interviews from people who'd made different decisions, right? Like one like trans esporter who was going to participate and said it's important for people to see someone like me at this event, and someone else who stayed away saying it's unfortunate that the event is here where people like me are going to feel uncomfortable, and so I don't want to, I don't think it should be there. We shouldn't have to make such tough decisions. So I've seen both sides of that argument. My feeling in general is you're not going to change the hearts and minds of world leaders. Like I think there's special psychological profiles to world leaders and engaging with them. Like there's not like oh yeah, if we go meet with Kirzan Ilyumzhinov, he'll like become, a normal,
Right.
more open guy, right? Or if, oh yeah, if you just go play in like some chess tournament that Putin organizes, maybe slowly his heart will warm to the plight of Ukrainian children he's dropping bombs on, right? I don't believe that there's like any hope of that with leaders.
Mhm.
Um, So I think that whole like, oh, we have to go to represent and to build bridges, I think that's like BS. I don't think you have to think less or worse of the people who live in countries that have different degrees of, freedom and happiness and so forth. Like I think all the normal people are more like normal people everywhere, and they shouldn't be blamed for what their governments do too much. But I don't generally believe in this sort of engaging with idea.
Well, I agree with you. Like it probably won't change minds, like the people at the top, but
Yeah.
maybe for the general public, um, it might help them. Like it might move them in the right direction, as well. Um,
I believe in
because
engaging with
yeah,
with normal people. Yeah, the more people from different backgrounds meet each other, talk to each other, the more understanding normal people can build with each other.
um, and the other thing is like, boycotts don't necessarily always work, right? A lot of times, if you boycott a country or a group, they just feel victimized. They feel like, oh, the world's like attacking us. And then, if anything, that would make them further kind of like stringent in their beliefs and all the stuff we disagree with. So I don't know. My position is that it's like it's a very difficult topic, and I honestly have no idea. I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm actually really curious in what people think. We didn't get a lot of comments, on Twitter and on
Right.
Discord about this exact thing, but I'm sure we will get some in the YouTube. So
I
be
think an
good to know.
important way of thinking about it also is always thinking like, imagine that I'm wrong about my values or my reason for boycotting or this or that, right? Because normally the odds are about 50-50 that you're wrong and the other side is right,
Mhm.
somewhere in that range. So you always want to think like, what if I wrong? How would I want other people to engage with me or disengage from me? What would allow me to take in some new ideas or to look at something again, right? And that's probably what would help for other people to be open to your ideas or your thoughts as well. In case they're wrong and they do have something to learn from you, right? You need to approach them the way you would need to be approached, maybe.
Right. So
Well, it's great.
yeah, there you have it. Esports World Cup happening, I think in end of July in August.
Yeah,
So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see if chess is accepted as an esport.
yeah.
New kids on the block, and yeah,
Yeah. And by the way, let us know. Here's a random question, folks. Let us know if you feel like this is something you would want to see us cover. Like, do you want to see Jesse, Kostya, or myself covering an esports event or covering more, blitz chess
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
online chess, or should we stick with what we've done in the past, which is more classical events?
Right.
I do like that they're playing in person on the computer. I know a lot of people don't like that. I think it's cool. Like you could play with like the headphones,
Mhm.
and they're playing no increment chess. So like they can't do that OTB. Like they gotta play on they gotta play on the computer.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, yeah. Let us know.
Okay, we'll end it there, and we'll see you next time.